There is no more despicable coward than the man who deserted the battle for his joy. So let's take a look at it. I think the overall lesson here, if we're looking at the 12 rules for living, is that a person's concrete rules or suggestions or ethics or value choices or priorities are set or at least shaped by what Ayn Rand called metaphysical value judgments. Metaphysical value judgments is a term she made up to cover one's view on metaphysics insofar as they shape the rest of one's value choices. In other words, before you can say what you ought to do, you have to know what the world out there you're dealing with is like. So metaphysical value judgments are judgments answering questions such as, and this is her list, is the universe intelligible to man or unintelligible and unknowable? Can man find happiness on earth, or is he doomed to frustration and despair? Does man have the power of choice, the power to choose his goals and to achieve them, the power to direct the course of his life, or is he the helpless plaything of forces beyond his control, which determine his fate? Is man by nature to be valued as good or to be despised as evil? Peterson is on both sides of all those questions, and it's very frustrating to read him for that reason. I'm going to begin with some of the horrific side of him and contrast it to Ayn Rand. His view on happiness and suffering. Here's a quote. "Pain matters more than matter matters. It is for this reason, I believe, that so many of the world's traditions regard the suffering attendant upon existence as the irreducible truth of being." The suffering attendant upon existence as the irreducible truth of being. Suffering, in other words, is what's really real, at least in the view of the world's traditions, which he's a big defender of. Suffering is what's important. Suffering is the avenue into real reality. And that's what metaphysical value judgments are all about. What's important? What's essential to life? What's the real truth behind the superficial appearances? So a person like Ayn Rand believes, yes, suffering exists, but it's not the essential, it's not important, it's not what really matters. Peterson reverses that. Here's what Ayn Rand says on the same subject. But first I should reread that short thing from Peterson to set it up again, because it's probably gone out of your minds. "Pain matters more than matter matters. It is for this reason I believe that so many of the world's traditions regard the suffering attendant upon existence as the irreducible truth of being," with a capital B. Ayn Rand, in Atlas Shrugged, has her heroes say two things, among others. One is, never think of pain or danger or enemies a moment longer than is necessary to fight them. And this, Dagny, that's one of the characters who's being spoken to. Dagny, it's not that I don't suffer. It's that I know the unimportance of suffering. I know that pain is to be fought and thrown aside, not to be accepted as part of one's soul and as a permanent scar across one's view of existence. So there you have the exact opposite viewpoints. Pain is unimportant, not to dominate your consciousness. Pain is important. It's the most important thing. You've got to accept it. What about the view of man? Peterson. We're pack animals, beasts of burden. We must bear a load to justify our miserable existence. Our existence is miserable. It needs justification. We justify it by toiling in the service of something. Now here's Ayn Rand. Man's proper estate is an upright posture, an intransigent mind, and a step that travels unlimited roads. Complete opposite. Peterson, happiness is unimportant. That's not a quote, but happiness is unimportant. Suffering is the real goods, the meaning of life. Ayn Rand, again from Atlas Shrugged. There is no moral substitute for happiness. There is no more despicable coward than the man who deserted the battle for his joy, fearing to assert his right to existence, lacking the courage and the loyalty to life of a bird or a flower reaching for the sun. Now, it's not that Peterson is a Christian ascetic. If he were, it would be easier just to evaluate him. He'd be all black. But he also thinks that you shouldn't be a coward. You should man up and try to achieve things. But it's a kind of Byronic universe where you struggle, you fight your fate, you're going to bear the scars, you're going to be wounded in the end, you're going to die and lose, but you've got to make the effort. You've got to justify your miserable existence. What's behind these views?